everybody. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That is my awesome guest host, Steve Glerum.
Hello.
Yes, Steve Glerum is filling in for Rob today, and we are thankful to have him once again. Rob will be hopefully back next week, but Steve has been a somewhat regular guest on the podcast. He's been on a number of times, so diehard listeners will be familiar with Steve's voice.
I'm not wearing any sports memorabilia because I don't have any. Otherwise, I would try to be as much like Rob as I could.
I think one Rob is enough. I definitely don't think we need anyone emulating Rob.
That's all the world can handle.
That's right.
Too much awesomeness. Yeah.
Yes, but we have Steve here, and we have an awesome show for you. We will, of course, give you an update on what's going on at the box office. Hint, not much. We'll talk about some re-releases. We'll briefly hit the Oscar nominations, and we're going to revisit 2014 movies. Yes, they are now turning 10 years old this year. Hard to believe that 2014 is 10 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like whenever Ryan and I talk about things, we're talking in decades now. Like we were in college 2 decades ago. You know, it's depressing.
It's increasingly so. And we will conclude with our watch list, movies we've watched over the last week. All right. Let's kick it off with a rundown of the box office. So not too much to report for this past week. It was the lowest total box office take of the year so far. Of course, the year is only a few weeks old. But in other words, not a lot happened this week. Your number one was Mean Girls at 11.6 million. That's in its second week to number one both weeks. It did have a 59% drop off. So that's, kind of like the high end of average in terms of drop off from week one to week two. The Beekeeper had a 48% drop off in week two. 8.6 million came in number two on the box office. Wonka hung in there at number three, 6.7 million in its sixth week in the box office. Fifth week in the box office, Migration at number four at 5.46 million. And Anyone But You came in number five again this week, 5.4 million. It is at $64 million domestically and $100 million globally, which we'll hit up in a second here. Anything stick out to you from the box office numbers there?
My thoughts would be that Wonka, whoever made Wonka, is the most pleased with their results with that release.
Yeah.
Out of all of those, I think the Beekeeper is what I've seen advertised the most. But it doesn't seem like the numbers are that great for that one.
They're okay. He's 2 weeks, 31 million. So, I mean, it probably wasn't a super high budget movie, but yeah, nothing so far is making a ton of money. Wonka, incidentally, is up over 187 million. So that is clearly the standout from the Christmas season / early 2024.
Yeah. And it's nice to see comedy's not completely dead.
Yeah. And we will
cancer culture hasn't totally wiped it out, I guess.
It's starting to come back. You're seeing little inklings of it here and there of actual return of actual comedy. And this one specifically, romantic comedy, comes in. Just a note, Rob talked about having seen this movie last week, but ISS, a new release to the box office, made 3 million and came in at number 7. So that's got to be a disappointing release for a week that not a whole lot was coming out to have one of your new releases pull in just $3 million.
Yeah, I mean, you told on your last podcast episode, I think it was, you said what the premise was, and I thought it was a pretty interesting sounding premise.
Yeah.
But having watched the trailer, which I didn't see it anywhere, I had to look for it, but it didn't really grab my attention too much. Even though the plot sounds like it could be good, but it wasn't like there was anything in this movie that's like, okay, that seems like something worth watching.
Yeah.
My kind of thought of just wondering, just in general, with the things these days, is just like we've gotten really lazy with all the streaming options.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't know, if I was trying to put a finger on the pulse of like what's a sure thing anymore, like that's changed so much, and it's
Oh
so
yeah.
hard to tell. Like when things do well, it seems like a surprise, like
Mm-hmm.
you have a fluke thing like Barbieheimer or
Yeah.
Wonka or something. Is just kind of like, well, what is? Yeah, I'm sure that the movie producers are trying to figure out what is a sure thing anymore, and being a lot more cautious, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. The tastes have changed. The what people are looking for has changed. The dissatisfaction, disconnect between the studios and the audience has really made a difference. And so, yeah, it's really difficult to determine what's going to succeed and what isn't.
Yeah, I think on your podcast you pointed out a lot of the different factors, like things like distrust, like Disney's lost people's trust and the superhero fatigue, all those different things. There's so many different factors, but they all add up to just poor results these days.
Yeah. Well, one movie that has surprisingly succeeded really well was Anyone But You. As we talked about a second ago, it's up to 64 million in the box office domestically, $100 million worldwide. And it has been really, really difficult for comedies over the last almost 10 years now, as comedy has really died out, and specifically romantic comedies. But even so, like R-rated comedies have really had a rough go of it. You haven't had much success. You obviously, it's generally accepted that R-rated movies have a smaller audience percentage than do like PG-13 movies. So that's why R-rated movies have tended to not do well. The last time an R-rated comedy hit $100 million was 2016 in Bridget Jones' Diary. So that's going back a ways. And for some reason, this is one that resonated with audiences. The interesting thing about it is didn't do it right away. Go ahead.
Oh. Was that Bridget Jones's Baby? Was it?
Yeah, Bridget Jones's Baby. Yes, the second one. Correct.
And I think No Hard Feelings did okay recently, but it never hit 100 million.
Yeah,
I think it was
No
like
Hard
87 million.
Feelings. 87 million for No
Okay.
Hard Feelings. So
Which I think they
yes.
were pretty pleased with.
Mm-hmm.
Or-
Yeah, they were pleased with that, and as they should, because that's not a bad take, especially for a comedy. Comedies have much lower budgets because you don't have any of the VFX stuff. So they tend to be had in the past had been money makers. What's really interesting about this one is it did something that is hard to find, in that it actually increased its box office percentage for a couple weeks in a row in the middle of its run. Because normally, as we talk about on the podcast, highest weekend is always the first weekend. And then you're just trying to mitigate the fall off and the drop off from weeks away. And that's how you succeed, is you just have small drop offs. But average would be somewhere in the 50, like 55 would be like dead average. So between 50 and 55 is the low end of normal. 55 and 60 is the high end of normal. Anything outside that range is a bit of an aberration, and that's drop off. This movie actually, on several weekends in a row in the middle of its run, actually increased its box office take. So it's clearly a movie that started out at a low level, but gained steam and word of mouth as people went to see it and spread it. So which is really interesting. So I'm wondering
you
if
can't underestimate the word of mouth effect.
Yes.
I feel like that's like
Mhm.
that's the one. Like if a movie has that, then it can do well. I feel like.
Yeah, and we've seen it with big releases like Top Gun, and just how long Top Gun kept dominating the box office. It was just word of mouth, word of mouth, word of mouth, and then everybody's going to see it. You've also seen it in smaller releases like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which really just continued a long run at a low level because people kept talking about it. And this one's the latest in that chain.
So it's like the trust is low, maybe generally, but then when they're hearing from other people, then they're like, okay, I'll go check it out.
Yeah. because it's so rare that comedies are even coming out now that you hardly feel like you can trust that they're going to be worth going to see.
Right. And like going back to the streaming element, like I feel like we all live at a smorgasbord now.
Yes.
So it's like it's hard to actually get yourself to go out to the theater. Like, what's the point when I can watch 50 different things on 50 different things?
Yeah.
So it really needs to be something special to get people actually going.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. All right, so that's last week's box office. There's not much coming out this week, but I'll highlight two things that are newish in the box office. I'll say newish because the first one we're going to talk about is Godzilla minus one minus color. So, if you can parse out that word salad of a title there, it's a re-release of Godzilla minus one, this time in black and white, thus the Godzilla minus one minus color. So if you like this movie, or if you haven't seen it and still want another shot, you can go see it in black and white.
You think they were always intending to release it in black and white, or do you think this is after it did well?
Ooh, I I did read a quick article about it maybe a week or so ago that this was coming out, but I don't remember the genesis of this, whether it was an after effect or whether it was planned all along. I'm guessing they had some level of in the works for it, and then once the movie did well, they're like, "Hey, let's go ahead and release it." So yeah, so you can see that one. The other one that's new, and we don't normally highlight these, but there's a new movie from it's an Indian cinema film called Fighter, and its top IAF aviators come together in the face of imminent danger to form air dragons. Fighter unfolds their camaraderie, brotherhood, and battles internal and external. So you kind of have like the Indian Top Gun, as it were. But that's releasing in American cinemas, and that's new for this week. It's we've talked about this briefly a number of times, but almost every single week there's at least one movie from Indian cinema in main box offices around the country. And this is definitely a trend that's increasing and here to stay.
Hollywood's doing just fine, apparently.
Yes. And I have not yet dived into any of these Indian cinema films. But if I were ever going to check one out, this one might be the closest one to get my attention to it, because it looks like it'd be got some action going for it.
Yeah, the audience must be growing over here.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Also, we have a couple of re-releases. Oppenheimer still in IMAX for this week. So if you're interested in seeing Oppenheimer again, you can check that out in your local IMAX theater. Also be on the lookout for your Oscar nominations, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. But a lot of your local Regals and some of your other cinemas around are re-showing the movies that have been nominated for Oscars. Some of them at a discounted rate, because they're kind of re-releases. I know Regal is throwing them out there for like $5, if you want to see it. So if there's any of the Oscar nominations that you have missed, you can check them out at your local Regal. They'll probably be in for a few weeks here. You might have to compete for an afternoon showing time though, because not all of them are re-releasing at night. So you might have to find a day off, or find a Saturday or Sunday afternoon to go see something like this. One more bit of news for box office. It was announced that Tenet is coming back to IMAX on February 23rd. So this is the 2020 Christopher Nolan movie that was the first movie back in cinemas post-pandemic. So the theaters reopened for this one, and then promptly shut back down like, a month later, 2 months later. But if you missed it because of those type of things, you get your chance to see it back in IMAX theaters, including if their theaters are running 70 millimeter, they're going to be bringing back those versions as well. So you have a chance to go see Tenet in IMAX. And you're seeing a lot of these because they're trying to fill the void left when all the movies got delayed because of the strike. And so you're getting a bunch of re-releases. What do you think? Would you Would you go back and rewatch either Oppenheimer or Tenet in IMAX?
For me, it's what I watch Oppenheimer for the first time.
Oh, you missed
I
that.
never,
Oh,
I
you
never
need to
saw it.
own
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, if only I had friends who were into that sort of movie to watch it with. No, yes, I think I really should capitalize on that. For Tenet, that is a movie. I feel like it was made to be watched multiple times.
It
Like
was.
you're not expected to get it the first time, and every time you see it, I just feel like it gets better. So I would totally be up for watching that again. I'm trying to remember if we saw it in IMAX or if we just saw it.
I think we
Uh,
saw it in a regular theater when I went with
yeah,
you. I saw an IMAX when it opened, but I think you missed the premiere and we went later.
yeah, I think that's right. But yeah, definitely a movie worth watching in the theater, and I'm sure it's definitely worth it in IMAX. So I would definitely be up for either of those in IMAX.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the box office update for now. We're going to hit briefly the Oscar nominations that came out this week. We're not going to get too detailed into them at the moment, as we'll cover these in greater detail when you get closer to the time and as we roll out our coverage. But a few things of note here. We'll just hit the top categories. Oppenheimer scored 13 nominations. Poor Things scored 11. Killers of the Flower Moon 10. Barbie 8. And Maestro 7. Um, so the major highlights here are the best supporting actor nominations are Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction, Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling in Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. I would think Downey Jr. has the inside track here for Oppenheimer, but we will see on that one. Best Supporting Actress. Emily Blunt was nominated for Oppenheimer. Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple. America Ferrera for Barbie. Jodie Foster for Nyad. And Davine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. This one's a little bit more open. I'm guessing Davine Joy Randolph from Holdovers. Do you have any thought on that one?
Thoughts on that one? I was thinking more for the first one, the best supporting actor. I was surprisingly, I think, I just recently watched Barbie
Hmm.
for the first time, and I never understood why they cast, Ryan Gosling for that role, other than the fact that he is at the level of, that he's at, celebrity wise. But watching it, I was like, okay, this makes total sense. Like he nailed that role and just the ridiculousness of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was great. But yeah, I feel like somebody in a more serious role is going to get that.
Yeah. So.
Like I said, I didn't watch Oppenheimer, but I've heard great things about Robert Downey Jr. I feel like the Killers of the Flower Moon didn't do well, but it's kind of what they like to like in the
Yeah.
Oscars. That's kind of
Yeah.
what they
Correct.
would. So yeah, those are my only thoughts.
Yeah. Best actor category: Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, Paul Giamatti from The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy from Oppenheimer, and Jeffrey Wright from American Fiction. This one might be close. This one might be close. I think your three front runners are Bradley Cooper, Paul Giamatti, and Cillian Murphy. And I think it's really going to come down between Paul Giamatti and Cillian Murphy for Holdovers and Oppenheimer. The Golden Globe went to Cillian Murphy, but some of the other ones I think are leaning Paul Giamatti. So I think those are your two. Those are your two front runners.
Did you see the holdovers?
I did. I did. I finally got around to it in the last week. It's a really good movie. It's.
Okay.
I would put it in there in the same category like I was talking about with like Dead Poet Society, Emperor's Club. Like one of those classic like old school boarding house school films. So I think it fits within that category.
Yeah, and they nailed the feel, I think, of those old movies. Like you hear the premise and you're like, that doesn't sound like an interesting movie, but then you see the trailer and you're like, okay, it looks like they did it right.
Yeah, I think they did. Now, I wouldn't put it quite at the level of Dead Poet Society, but I think it was a good movie. Best Actress: Annette Bening, Naiad; Lily Gladstone, Killers of the Flower Moon; Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall; Carey Mulligan in Maestro; and Emma Stone in Poor Things. I don't have a feel for this one.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I mean, I guess between Emma Stone and Lily Gladstone.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm not sure which way they're going to go for this one. Best Director: Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall; Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon; Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer; Yorgos Lanthimos, Poor Things; and Jonathan Glazer, The Zone of Interest. I'm guessing it's going to Nolan this time.
That'd be my hope.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's the
uh,
sort of movie that they would acknowledge too.
yeah.
You know.
And Nolan deserves deserves
Yeah.
a best director at some point here.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I saw another Jonathan Glazer movie yesterday, which we'll talk about in the watch section, Under the Skin. So that's another. So I've never heard of Zone of Interest, but if it's anything like Under the Skin, it'll be weird and unusual. So Best Picture, the nominees: American Fiction, Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, Holdovers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Past Lives, Poor Things, The Zone of Interest.
Oh,
How many of those have you seen?
I don't think I've seen any of them.
You said you saw Barbie.
Oh, that's right, Barbie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which just looking at like headlines after
Mm-hmm.
the Globes, it was like they were so upset that Barbie didn't get more than it got. You know, it was just a sign of the patriarchy still in power kind of a thing. So for that sake, I hope that Barbie gets it. Otherwise, there's going to be some kind of revolution or something. But
I
no, no,
absolutely
I
hope
have.
I absolutely
Yeah,
hope
no, I
Barbie
hope
does
Barbie does
not
not
get
get
it.
it.
It's like,
Yeah,
welcome to the party. Where have you been for the last 20 years? Movies that do super well in the box office never win anything. Even very,
exactly.
very good movies that do
This
very well at
isn't
the box office don't win anything. It's
exactly.
like you just heard of this just today.
Yeah,
Do you not know what industry you're in? Your
right,
glorified toy commercial movie is not going to win a bunch of Oscars. Like they might give you some just to like placate you because you're flipping out, but no.
right. This
I'm
is not
sorry.
the People's Choice Awards.
Yes, Greta Gerwig does not deserve to be nominated for Best Director. Come on.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think Oppenheimer has the inside track here, but you never know. You just never know.
yep.
All right, so that's the Oscar nominations, and so we'll get into more of those later as the podcast unfolds in the next week and month or two. But now let's move to our discussion. The discussion for this week is 2014 Revisited. Yes, we're going to look back at the movies that came out in the year 2014. Believe it or not, they are 10 years old now. And so I thought we'd have some fun with this. We're going to do some more of these going through. Maybe we'll do one, movies that came out 20 years ago and 25 years ago, something like that, on later episodes of the podcast. But we're starting with ones that came out 10 years ago, 2014. So I will just give some rundown of a few stats for 2014 off the top before we get into our lists of movies here. The top movie in the box office, and I did this by year in releases. So, like, if a movie came out in December 2014, I included its entire run. So, not just the amount of money it made in 2014. So that means that the top grossing movie of 2014 was American Sniper at 350 million. Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, 337 million. Guardians of the Galaxy came in third with 333 million. Captain America Winter Soldier, 259 million. And the Lego movie, 257 million. So those are your top five from the box office from 2014. Some of the Oscars. Best Actor went to Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything. The Best Actress went to Julianne Moore in Still Alice. Best director went to Alejandro Iñárritu with Birdman, and Best Picture went to Birdman. So that just gives you a little recap on the year. But we thought we'd relitigate it, as it were, and come up with our own list of the best movies from 2014. I was trying to think of the best way to do this. And I thought maybe we go like 3 at a time. We read from 10 down and just do 3 at a time and tackle them. And then if, the first person to say a specific movie that happens to be on your list, we'll just talk about it at that point. Sound good?
Good. Yep.
All right. So Rob, I almost said Rob. Geez. I'm so used to this being Rob. Steve.
You can call me Rob. I'm okay with that. It's a compliment.
All right. What are your go 10, 9, 8? What are your best picture or best movies of 2014?
Okay. 10 is Draft Day.
Oh, okay. Yes.
9 is Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1.
Okay.
8 is American Sniper.
Ah, nice. Okay. Very good. I don't have any of those on my list, and they are all good movies. So
there were a lot of good movies that year, so I understand.
There were. Actually, that was one thing that surprised me, is the amount of good movies that did come out in 2014. It feels like we have so many more, from 10 years ago than we do now. But we're not talking about now. So give me your rundown. What did you like about each one of those? Since I don't have any of them on my list.
Yeah. So Draft Day, I'm surprised how good of a movie that is for me.
Yeah.
Like this is a list very personal to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I'm not a sports guy. Like, right. I'm very casual. Like I'll watch football games and I'm a casual Eagles fan at best, kind of thing. But it's like, even when it comes to sports movies, I kind of have a sports movie fatigue. It's
sure.
My wife wants to watch more than I do, to be honest. It's kind of like once I kind of figure out, okay, this is how all these movies go, I kind of lose interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know they try to, spice up the sports movies and stuff, but this isn't even a sports movie. This is about the draft. Like it's very sports, but it's very not, football game kind of thing. But like they do it so well. Like it's such an interesting, engaging movie. Like Kevin Costner, I feel like does a great job of just keeping your interest. I don't watch the draft in real life, but like this is a movie I would easily watch again anytime, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. I was actually very late into the Hunger Games thing. I'm kind of somebody who's like, if there's a big hype thing, I'm like, I don't need to bother with that until like 5 years later or so, kind of a thing. But then when I went through the whole series, like this is actually really good. I understand why this was a big hit. I couldn't tell you what happened to that movie exactly. Kind of all, I've seen all these movies a long time ago. It's been a while. But I think it was, just that whole series was really well done. I did read the first one and I was impressed with how close the book was to the movie, which is very rare for how close it was. But I thought it was really interesting going through the list of movies in 2014. The same year that came out was also the same year Divergent came out and Maze Runner came out. The movies that were trying to capitalize on that teen action and keep that going, and it never really had the same effect. I mean, they weren't the same caliber in the end. Like Maze Runner was definitely a good movie. It was on my top 10, for a little bit, and then it dropped off. It's one of those, it's like, I think it was a good movie until the very end. It's one of those, like, when it's a mystery of what's going on, it really keeps your interest. But then when you find out, you're like, oh, and then you're like, kind of lose interest at that point. I don't even know if I saw the second one. I know I didn't see the third one. But yeah, so I feel like the Hunger Games was its standalone. This is the only one who really nailed it.
I was really close to putting that one on my list. The hard part for me is because it is a part 1 and part 2. I absolutely love part 2. I watched them actually this past year, and part 2 is so, like, especially the way they wrap everything up in a ball is so good that I just couldn't. I had a hard time separating part 1 and part 2 out, and so I just couldn't put. It's in my honorable mentions. I just couldn't put part 1 there.
And then my number 8, American Sniper. This isn't a movie that I would just watch anytime. But it just was one that I felt like had to be on there. I mean, it kind of, doesn't fit with my I'm putting on the 10 top that I enjoy the most
Hmm.
kind of thing. But this is very much this is a movie that stays with you.
Yeah.
It was just so well done, and it coded so many lines just right in a way that like it did well in a time where I don't think patriotic movies were really well received. But like I think Clint Eastwood just nailed it
Hmm.
with his directing. I think Bradley Cooper's performance, like you feel like you get a very honest look at things,
Yeah.
but it's not out there just try to bash the military, or it's not
Yeah.
trying to glorify the military. It's very much this guy's story,
Hmm.
which is compelling in itself. But yeah, I think it was just done just right, which is would not have been easy to do, I feel like.
Yeah. This one was the toughest one on me. I put it as my top honorable mention. I left it just off my list. And the reason why is because I look back and like in the moment, it would have been near the top of my list for that particular year.
Mhm.
I can't say it's not a movie that I want to go back and watch a bunch of times.
True.
Therefore, like as it has receded into the past, like it just not has not had a lasting impact for me. And so that's the reason it's not on my top 10. Not because it's not a phenomenal movie, because it is. It's really, really good and really well done. Um, but it doesn't stick with me, and it's not something I want to go back and revisit. It's kind of like if you love Schindler's List. you're,
Right.
you're like you can acknowledge that Schindler's List is an amazing movie, but you're not like it's not a movie you want to go back and watch a bunch. And
Yeah.
so I think just because as I'm revisiting this list, I couldn't put it on the top 10 because of that reason.
I completely agree with that, and I feel like this is the one outlier where it's like I felt required to put it on the top
Yeah.
10 because it was
And
so
I
good.
and I can't dispute that.
Yeah.
All right. So my bottom three are Her,
Mm.
the movie with Joaquin Phoenix, where he essentially dates his dates his digital girlfriend, as it were. The Maze Runner. I did put the Maze Runner on. I'll talk about why. And Grand Budapest Hotel. I had eighth. Did you have any of those on your list?
I did not. I
Okay.
almost put Budapest Hotel.
Okay.
Almost.
Um, her was like an early entrant into exploring the idea of how pervasive online relationships are, and how far does that go, and how far can you take that, and what are the consequences of that. And so I thought it was really well done. It was different, and certainly uncomfortable at times and very awkward, but it was a really good exploration of that topic, um, which is something that when a movie is done well, you can explore something without it, shining a beacon and saying, "This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing." Uh, so I really enjoyed that one for that reason.
Never saw it.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting one. I put the Maze Runner on here. I put the Maze Runner in above Hunger Games, even though probably, I mean, there's no doubt about the Hunger Games series was substantially better than the Maze Runner series. And I'm glad you brought up that because it was like, okay, the Hunger Games is doing amazing. Let's find the next teen young adult series that we can just take advantage of, and nothing could come off. But I think this individual movie was the closest, because
Yeah.
I think the first movie is actually really good, and I get what you're saying. Like towards the end, you're like, oh, okay, it's this, and it does feel like from there it just goes on to a lot of young adult dystopian tropes,
Mm.
and that's where it heads. And we're like, okay, yeah, we've seen the dystopian thing before, but up until like let's say the last 10 minutes of it, 10-15 minutes is really good. I think it's really compelling, and unfortunately, they were not able to duplicate that or any other young adult series after that. But I think that movie in and of itself stands up and holds up.
Yeah.
All right, give me 7, 6, and 5.
Did you do your number seven or your number eight?
I do. Oh, Grand Budapest Hotel. I didn't talk about that one. Yeah, Grand Budapest. I mean, you know, I love Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson is amazing. The visualizations in this one are fantastic. It's classic Wes Anderson. He is a genre all to himself. And this was one of his better ones. I would say this is one of his better ones. It's one of the ones that's less esoteric and a little bit easier to follow for non like major Wes Anderson buffs. But it's just interesting. You have interesting characters, interesting surroundings, and it gives you that. It kind of gives you the Wes Anderson experience without pushing you away too much, like some of his other movies will do to some people.
Yeah, you just feel different walking out of a Wes Anderson movie. Like it affects how you feel. Like
Yes.
you almost feel like you're still in a Wes Anderson movie walking out of the theater for some reason. This
sure.
is not this does not rank as high on my list of Wes Anderson movies. Like I enjoyed it, but I just feel like every Wes Anderson movie I like more than the last. Like I just think he gets better and better.
That's good. Yeah.
So it was a good one, but it's not. I think because it ranks lower in my list of Wes Anderson movies, I didn't put it on my top 10.
Yeah. All right, 765.
All right, 7 was John Wick. 6 was Ragnarok, and 5 was the Lego Movie.
Yes. Okay. All right. So talk about I do have John Wick, so I'll hit that one up when you're done talking about yours.
So I feel like in some ways the John Wick series got better over time, but I think the first one is my favorite personally, which I know is not the typical perception, but I think it's just because of my threshold for violence. Like that one was fine with me. 2 was okay, it was coming the line, and then after that it kind of lost me. So for that reason, I really like the first one. I think it's because Keanu is just for real. Like he is just amazing. Like he became this amazing marksman. Like and with this, like he can really shoot great. Like winning
he knows what he's doing,
shooting competitions.
Yeah.
And then the attention to that kind of realism, like I heard, when you have, and this is maybe going to be a weird conversation with the whole Rust thing that's been going on, but with like bullets, like the blanks that they use for movies and things like that, they always have like a star on the back of the cartridges of the bullets, just so you know they're fake. Like they were so attention to like realism and everything. They don't have that in that movie. Like the cartridges they used look like exactly real bullets. Like all the this that kind of attention, but just like Keanu went all out, I think, in making it like I think he really could beat people up like he did in that movie because he was so well trained in every way.
Yeah. John Wick is amazing. And I ended up with John Wick at number 2 on my list. Because I think it took action movies to the next level. It helped reinvent action movies, kind of the way the Bourne movie, the Bourne, not the Bourne Supremacy. I'm blanking. Bourne Identity. Helped transform action movies. I think John Wick helped transform action movies. It elevated them to a cinematic level. So you weren't just getting like great action sequences and great things. Like you were getting great cinematography. You were getting great choreography. It just took them to the next level. And so John Wick is very high on my list for that reason.
Similar to how Keanu did it with The Matrix too.
Yeah.
Like that was another big step in action movies back then.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? I think in the first one it's nice because like when you're introduced to him, he's very unassuming. Like for the rest of the series, you know exactly who you're dealing with. But in the beginning, everybody talks about him like he's this legend, but you don't quite understand why until they kill his dog, and then you understand why. I think they did a great job with it. And it just started that whole series. There's a lot of, I think, movies on my list that were the beginning of a franchise because the first one was so good.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 6 was Ragnarok. Probably the best Thor movie, in my opinion. I actually haven't even seen Love and Thunder, but it doesn't sound like I'm missing a lot.
And actually, we
Um,
should say Thor Ragnarok is actually not a 2014 movie.
wasn't it? I thought I
There
saw it
is
on there.
there is another movie called Ragnarok, but Thor
Oh,
Ragnarok is not on there.
okay,
I was
that
like,
makes
wait a
sense
second,
because
it
I was
seems
like,
too early for that.
it does. I was like, that was the same movie as Guardians of the Galaxy came out. Like that doesn't sound right at all.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
Thor Ragnarok is 2017, but there is a movie Ragnarok that came out
okay,
in 2014.
that solves that mystery. Does that mean I get to take one of my honorable mentions and
You
put it
do.
into my top 10?
You do.
Yes. All right. So skipping that because I just lied to everyone. Um, number five, the Lego Movie.
Okay.
Um, this is similar to my number four, which I won't say yet, but it was a surprise just how good it was.
Hmm.
It's like once the Lego Movie franchise was started, then you know what you're getting and everything. But it was yeah, surprisingly good, surprisingly funny. Um, and it was I feel like this is the year of Chris Pratt launching franchises.
Yes.
This was him in his glory days for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just a really good movie for everyone to enjoy.
Nice. Nice. So 765 for me is number seven, Guardians of the Galaxy, number six, Nightcrawler, and number five, Edge of Tomorrow. Uh, do you have any of those?
Yes. Wait, what was your number seven?
Number seven was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, I have that one, and I have Edge of Tomorrow as well.
Okay. All right. Uh, Guardians of the Galaxy was similarly surprising in that, I mean, Marvel was cooking at this point,
Mhm.
but um, this completely unknown bit of characters set in space and have basically no connection to Earth whatsoever. You weren't sure what to expect with this particular movie, and then you went to see it, like, wow, this movie is so fun. This movie is one of the funnest ones in the series, along with the one you mentioned earlier, Thor Ragnarok, which is not a 2014 movie, but it was just so much fun and interesting. The characters were some of the most compelling ones in the cinematic universe. And you really enjoyed them and cared them. And it was just a fun movie to watch.
Mhm. So it is my number four.
Okay.
But yeah, I think you nailed it. Like that's exactly all the reasons. It was like you heard they were doing Guardians of the Galaxy, and anybody who even knows Marvel is like, why? Like, who are you? Like, first of all, they're probably asking who is that, but then like, why would you go that route?
Yeah.
But then it was just right. And I think it really opened up the Marvel universe to like the whole space alien element really
Yes.
well. Open that door. So yeah, everything you said, I agree.
Hmm. Six, I had Nightcrawler. Have you seen Nightcrawler?
I never did. Yeah.
It is an interesting movie. It's an interesting movie. Jake Gyllenhaal is in this one, and it really is. He becomes a freelance news photographer, news cinematographer. So he'll record something that happens and then sell it to a local news station. And it really is about um, the proliferation of the 24-hour news cycle and their need for drama and their need for news, and how it becomes like a positive feedback loop. Well, we're putting this out there, so then we need more, and then we need more, and then we need more, and so it gets to the point where you almost start. They're asking the question of, at what point does your need to report the news actually lead to you creating said news? And so it follows along Jake Gyllenhaal's character as he goes further down in the descent of this, where he moves from simply selling news to creating news to sell. And so it really explores kind of that avenue. Really, it's kind of a dark film, but it's really compelling. And I had Edge of Tomorrow. Really contemplated having this one higher up on the list. This is one of the great action movies or great sci-fi movies of the 2010s. It's one of the better time travel movies, and the character interplay between Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt is excellent. It has naming issues. Is it called Live, Die, Repeat? Is it called Edge of Tomorrow? Is it called both? Are they both in there? Is one? Which one? I don't know. But really excellent sci-fi action movie.
Edge of Tomorrow is my number one.
Oh wow! So we cribbed your number one already. Oh man, sorry
Yes,
about that.
it's okay. It's all right.
All right,
Yeah, I totally, should I talk about it now?
yeah, go ahead. Well, it's up to you. So this is your number one. I will let you save it for the end if
Okay.
you want.
I will save it.
Okay, all right. What did you have for 4, 3, and 2?
The four was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
Three was Interstellar.
Mm,
It did come out in 2014,
it
right?
did.
I got that one. Okay,
Yes, you
good.
got that one right.
Uh, uh, do you want my number two?
Yep.
Two was Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Okay. Awesome. All right, hit it
Yeah.
up.
So for number three, Interstellar, just Nolan's way of taking like the most out there, I mean, the most accurate scientific theories and making a very compelling movie out of them is just like no one has made science so interesting since Bill Nye the Science Guy. You know, it really is so well done. It's such a great story, and it's one of those just kind of, yeah, he has a great way of blowing your mind.
Mhm.
And that's, but it was like it's one of those I could watch it again anytime,
Yeah.
which is not what you'd expect from what the material you're working with.
Mhm. I will save talking about Interstellar.
Okay. Number two, Captain America: Winter Soldier. This is just a shining light in the whole
Mhm.
Marvel, I
Mhm.
think, series. Like it was just such a good movie. The action is like top notch.
Yeah.
Um, it's great, I think, in the Captain America trilogy.
Mhm.
Probably I'd say the best in the trilogy. Um, and it's when the whole Hydra thing, that bomb drops and
Mhm.
changes. It's such a big change in that whole storyline. So, yeah, I just think that one is probably my favorite Marvel movie.
You're not alone on that. A lot of people feel like The Winter Soldier is, if not the standout movie in the series, then in the top three. So yeah, you're very much on solid ground with a lot of people viewing that as one of the better Marvel movies. I've never quite liked it as much as many other people do. Like I can recognize it was a really well done movie. It never quite resonated as my favorite one. And I don't 100% know why. Maybe I'll have to go back and rewatch it to see. But I didn't think my list had room for two Marvel movies in it, even though this was kind of like the height of Marvel. So they certainly could be.
I
And
mean,
I
I
just
had Marvel movies that weren't even made in that movie on my list. So,
and I think I just like Guardians of the Galaxy better, but I have no
mhm.
problem with the Winter Soldier being on there.
Yeah, I mean, for most impact, I think Infinity War is probably the best made, most emotionally impactful of the whole Marvel series. I will say the whole Bucky Barnes character,
Yeah.
Bucky was never, I've never been a huge fan of it, but I think when he is first introduced, he's like this, uh, such a good bad guy.
Yeah.
But after that, I'm kind of like, I was never that into him. Um, But yeah, I feel like that's kind of the only weakness. But no, it just has such a good. Yeah, I just remember it so fondly.
Yeah, I mean, it just definitely has some good scenes to it, especially when they're down there in that bunker and Hydra gets revealed when they're down there in that bunker. That's a pretty powerful scene.
And the elevator fight scene
Oh
is
yeah.
great.
Hmm.
And then when they in Endgame when they kind of flip it around. But also, yeah, just a lot of action scenes really pop into my brain when I think of it.
Hmm. All right.
Your turn.
Number 4 for me, Gone Girl. Number 3, Whiplash. And number 2, John Wick. So I already talked about 2, John Wick, but I really like Gone Girl. It was David Fincher. David Fincher is one of my favorite directors. It just has this eerie tone and feel to it, and it's just it's just like relationship craziness. It is.
Ben Affleck one.
Yeah, Ben Affleck, Rosamund Pike are the two mains there. And if if you haven't read the book, there's like or seen the movie, there's like a flip midway through the story. So the story is one thing for the first half of the movie and then becomes something else entirely for the second half of the movie. And everything leads you towards one conclusion, and then in a moment they flip the switch, and then you're on an entirely different journey. Have you seen this?
Not. I haven't seen half the movies on your list.
Yeah. So it's just it's really compelling and it's really interesting. It does not necessarily give you a flattering picture of marriage. Like it really is not designed to give you a flattering picture of marriage. But in terms of like, kind of like a murder mystery, suspense, relationship thriller, it's right up there with the best of them. And Fincher knocks it out of the park directorially, and keeping that tension and keeping you on the edge of your seat and then flipping a switch on. So Gone Girl, really good. Uh Whiplash. This is one of those smaller kind of releases. J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller, where J.K. Simmons plays this incredibly strict, demanding music teacher, and Miles Teller plays an up and coming like drum phenom, and how they just push each other just back and forth and back and forth, and it's one of those movies where like it's the demanding teacher and the resistant students just butt heads, and are, in this case are like practically like horrendously mean to each other, and at the end it just brings out the best in each one of them. And so it's one of those type of movies, but it's a compelling drama, and there's just a lot to it. And J.K. Simmons did win an Oscar for best supporting actor for his role in this one. Yeah, so really good. Whiplash.
I do remember that coming out. I remember the trailer. I remember it doing really well. I feel like it's one of those like the premise is like, ah, you wouldn't think that would be a great movie, but
Mhm.
it just done really well. I just remember the J.K. Simmons slapping, the other
Yeah,
guy. That's all I remember from the trailer.
yeah. It, I remember coming out. I remember being interested in it, Joe. I also remember it took me like a year and a half to see it. Like I did not see it right away. I think it took me a while to get to it. Yeah. And like I said, my number two was John Wick. So we already talked about John Wick. All right, give me your number one, man.
All right, Edge of Tomorrow.
Let's hear it. What was your thoughts on this one?
Um, just it's such an enjoyable movie. It
Yeah.
is. There's a certain point every time I watch this movie. There's a certain point where I'm like, this is what movies is all about. Like I'm just enjoying this just so much. It's got the Groundhog Day effect,
Mm-hmm.
element, but I feel like it's the best movie in using that element. Like it never gets redundant. I know it's blasphemy to say this, but there's always a point in Groundhog Day, the actual Groundhog Day movie, where I feel like, okay, this is getting a little old. Um, but I mean, granted, that was the first kind of movie I feel like that did that, and
Yeah.
plenty of movies have done it since. But yeah, Edge of Tomorrow is just, I mean, you get that the character arc is great.
Mm-hmm.
Of him become like he goes from like scum to a true hero. Um, the only weakness I feel of the movie is the ragtag group that
Mm.
he's assigned to. I don't feel like those characters really do anything for me,
Yeah.
which I know is kind of intentional. Like they're not supposed to be that great, but at the same time, it's like I wish they would have been a little bit more likable in one sense. But that's the only like criticism I have of this movie. Like
Mhm.
the characters are like Emily Blunt, Tom Cruise, and just the way they do the movie is just awesome.
What they do with Emily Blunt's character is awesome because, like, the way they portray her up into the point where you start realizing what's going on with her and like, oh, this is even better. And so that's awesome. Tom Cruise is awesome. The storyline is great. I 100% agree with you with the ragtag group that he's assigned with. That they annoy me,
Mhm.
and that's where I do feel like the repetitiveness gets to me a little bit in this movie because of them, and only because of them. Like none of the rest of it bothers me, but the fact that we have to, like, in particular, that the bunk scene, when he keeps coming back to the bunk scene and like the dialogue that they keep coming at him with and it was like that just it irritates me. So that's the only part of that that bugs me actually.
Mhm.
And that was enough to just kind of just drop it down just a little bit on my list. But it's really, really good movie.
Yeah, by the end, I'm like all in. I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
just loving this movie.
yeah, yeah. Very, very good. And it easily could have been higher on my list. But my number one is Interstellar, and it was going to be hard for Interstellar not to be number one on my list. I didn't want to like just pen. I didn't want to like write it in pen at number one before I went through all the movies that came out that year. But it was like it was it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So, I mean, my favorite director, one of my favorite movies. It was going to be real hard for this not to be number one for me. Um, you were right in saying like this was, and I think probably still is the most accurate scientific movie depicting space travel and space phenomenon that has ever existed. And it was, it was worked on by with a physicist, Kip Thorne. There's lots and lots. There's a whole book about the science of Interstellar, which is awesome if you're into it. But um, the way there are moments in here where Christopher Nolan is able to take the most like hard to understand scientific concepts and somehow makes them incredibly emotionally compelling. Like he comes back up from the water planet,
Yeah.
realizing that because of relativity, like his daughter is now aged 20 some years. And like, that in your head, but then him putting him in there with a room with a video of like the lives of his kids passing before his eyes just, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It just blows you away. It's unbelievable. So the idea that like Christopher Nolan, he doesn't use emotion. I was like, have you seen Interstellar? Like, have you seen this movie? And the unbelievable compelling visuals. It was the first time they had ever been able to accurately depict black holes to this level. Like they Kip Thorne fed all the data into to the computer models that the visual effects industry and was taking them like months to render. Just incredible detail. So the visuals are incredible. The cast is incredible. Like you feel the tension throughout the movie. The soundtrack has continued growing on me. Like I just like this past week, I was listening to like Hans Zimmer playing the soundtrack live with the orchestra. I'm just like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Because Nolan told him is like, okay, we're gonna do most of the soundtrack with an organ. And he's like, an organ? Like, are you serious? We're gonna use an organ? And it sounds so incredible. And it has continued like since it came out, it's just continued rising. I don't think it's quite eclipsed Inception for me, but
Mhm.
it's so good.
Yeah. The soundtrack is interesting you say it because it has grown on me as well. Like at first, I remember it is very in your face, very abrasive, like
Mhm.
somebody just banging on an organ. But like I listen to it often and it is just so well done. It's so different, but it's
Yeah.
so good and it fits really well with just kind of the feel of the story. So yeah, Inception is still like my top Christopher Nolan movie, but this one's close.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's our wrap up of the top movies of 2014. That was fun. That was a good year to revisit. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. So we'll close out today just by talking about our watch list, movies that we watched over the last week and what we thought. Steve, what have you watched recently?
I finally just saw Super Mario Brothers movie.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I'm
What
so
do you think?
so delayed. I really enjoyed it. It's one of those movies, it's like okay, all the hype around it.
Mhm.
So then you don't want to get your hopes up. So I tried to have low expectations going into it. I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy some of the nostalgic elements to it. But yeah, I just enjoyed it all throughout. I thought it was funny. Like if I'm chuckling along the way of the movie, I consider that a funny movie. Like
Yeah.
I like Chris Pratt's voice as Mario. I was like, is this going to be really distracting for me? And it 5 minutes into it, it wasn't anymore. There was only
Mhm.
a few moments where it sounded like him, but yeah, it wasn't like something that was distracting me. they were very true to the Mario franchise in a very like good honoring way, you know. I thought they nailed it really well. So it's a yeah, really good story. It's one of those, you know, if a kids movie can be just as enjoyable for the adults as it is for the kids, that's when it's a good movie. If, you know, same with like the teen action things. If it's good beyond, if it transcends just what teens can enjoy, that
Yeah.
means it's a good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Super Mario Brothers was, I think, very good. I understand why people just took to it so well.
Nice. Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I didn't get why it became like this massive blockbuster that absolutely dominated. It was like, okay, it was good. I enjoyed it. I liked it.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it made as much money as it did. So
Mhm.
yeah. Anything else?
I watched Barbie a couple weeks ago, and I thought it was really well done. Yeah, that was another one I was chuckling enough throughout the movie to say, okay, this is a funny movie. Um, I think, like Rob said, I think in your last podcast, like they kind of beat you over the head a little bit
Yeah.
with their message. I kind of understand why, like they're kind of self-reflecting on Barbie for, you know, people who grew up playing with Barbies and people who are like adults now and kids now and like how she's perceived, like all that kind of stuff. It made sense why they kind of looked at it from a lot of different ways. But yeah, I think it was just the ridiculousness of it was well done. Um, so yeah, so I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Hmm.
I don't get to watch a lot of movies these days, so I probably
Yeah.
shouldn't be on a film podcast, but
It's
yeah,
all
Paw
good,
Patrol
man.
2 was good. Yeah,
There you go. There you go.
my life right now.
Yeah. I watched Cube, which is a 2021 Japanese remake of a 1997 movie. I've never seen the 1997 version, but the weekly movie challenge last week was to watch a movie like a Japanese movie or something set in Japan or something along those lines. Uh, Cube is interesting. It's like a classic, like locked room mystery. Like all these characters are wake up in this cube, this series of cubes that are interconnected, and some of them have like death traps in them, and you're not sure which ones do and which ones don't, and they're trying to navigate their interpersonal dynamics and try and figure out how to get out without getting killed. So you know, it's like classic locker room mystery, but it was good. It was well done. Um, I enjoyed it. I find it distracting to constantly have to read subtitles, but that's the nature you get when you get a Japanese movie. But it was good and it was interesting. Um, Interestingly enough, I'd already planned out that we were going to do 2014 revisited, and then this week's movie challenge from the weekly movie challenge feed was to watch a movie that has an anniversary this year, either 10-year anniversary, 25, or 50 years. And so I'm like, oh, 2014, I'm already doing that. Yes. So I watched one of the ones that was rated highly on a lot of lists, but I hadn't seen before, and that was Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson. And um eh. It's one of those where it's like, you know how some people it's like you're like, are you just pretending to like this because you like what it says about you that you like this? Do you know what I'm getting at? It's like,
I
well,
think
I'm a
so.
sophisticated movie savant. So what do you mean you don't like this? This is doing
Yeah.
this, this is saying this. Um, it's basically a movie about an unusual woman who is seemingly like like picking up these random guys in Ireland and like driving around in a van picking up these random guys and then messing with them, and then it turns out to be something slightly different, but the whole time you're like, all right, this is just really repetitive, because it's like she drives out in the van, she does her little like pickup line thing, the guy gets in the van, they go back to her house, and they do this weird feature where it's like the whole room is black, and then the guy just like slowly starts descending into water and disappears. And that's their like
Okay.
visual effect, and it just happens like 6 times, and like that's most of the movie. And so I mean I don't want to say too much more without giving, like, because there's like a thing that gives it away at the end. But I just left thinking like it was repetitive. It the whole time you're like, all right, what is going on? I didn't see the like artistic nature of it. I like it's done by A24 Studios and they're known for doing some crazy out there stuff. And this was certainly crazy and out there. I just
Mhm.
like sometimes those hit better than others, and I just didn't think this one hit that well. Yeah.
I'm actually satisfying that challenge. Last night I was looking through the all the movies that were, made in 2014, obviously. Um, and there was one I was like, you know what? All right, let me try this one. So I watched half of it last night. I haven't finished it. Got too late. But Heaven is for real.
Oh yes.
Um,
Mhm.
so I am not a big fan of faith-based movies. I always am frustrated that they're not better quality. I mean,
Yeah.
quality has continually been improving over the years.
Mhm.
But I was like, all right, let's try check this out. Um, and it was okay. It was good performances so far. I think their portrayals of the vision are like the weakest parts of the movie.
Mm.
Like if you could just cut those out, I think you'd have a more, I don't know, just a better movie overall. But
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna finish it.
Yeah.
And I still have my 48 hours of renting Super Mario Brothers isn't over yet, so I'm probably gonna watch that tonight. Uh,
Nice. Nice.
um, but yeah, I mean, there were apparently a lot of faith, like Christian movies that came out in 2014. There was God's Not Dead,
Yeah.
and the Left Behind, the newer one
Yeah.
with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting movie. I guess there's a good spectrum of like faith-based movies. I mean, Left Behind, I'm not sure how they felt like they could, some of the things in that movie, like, yeah. Um, but I mean, God's Not Dead, even though it's still not quite the quality I'm hoping for. Like, it
Mhm.
was a well-written movie. I think it was a good and well-received movie.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
it's a little rabbit trail.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
You got anything else?
Uh, no, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that is the show, everyone. Thanks for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you check out filmforfans.com. I'm going to try and put 2014 movies up on there, up on the website here in the next week or so. So be looking in for that. And until next time, enjoy the movies.